As mentioned earlier, my name is Bino Gopal. We're entering the PG-13 section of the presentation here, maybe, depends. We had some radar stuff with Anil, but now we're going to bring it back down a little. I'm just going to talk about operations and management, and here there should hopefully be a lot of interactivity. And in fact, I'm going to switch over pretty soon and actually pull up a NetScaler GUI and log in so we can actually look at what the interface looks like and show you guys some things you can do from an operations perspective. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the Nitro API on the NetScaler, right? So what is Nitro? The concept here is how can we basically address the NetScaler programmatically and provide a framework for not just you, but anyone who wants to operate and manage the NetScaler to talk to it. So we came up with this Nitro API. We used to have a SOAP XML API in previous versions. This is actually RESTful, and the idea is it's human readable, right? And we have the SDKs to abstract it. And as I mentioned, you know, it's all about exchanging data in a very structured way, right? So there's raw without formatting, and you can have it as part of scripts. And it's key to have something like this deployed for your SDN type environments, right? When you're looking to do orchestration and automation. And for example, right, you look at the examples of these requests because it's REST, right? Through a series of HTTP calls, we can talk to these backends and we can access these web services and see everything that can be configured, everything that's available, and what you can do with the box. So your typical tools for that kind of stuff, you know, you can use a plain old Chrome browser, you have your REST clients and your web clients that can talk to them for scripting. So what I'm going to do right now is actually log into some NetScalers for you guys and show you what the actual connectivity will look like. So here we have login. So for those of you how many of you have actually seen the NetScaler interface? Okay, good number of you. So how many of you have seen an SDX, which is the multi-tenant box? So what we're going to show you here is, as I'm logging in, this is actually going to be the landing page on our multi-tenant box. And assuming that my internet is up, which hopefully it should be. Connect. Come on. Oh, I know what the problem is. Just kidding. Give me 2 seconds. So as we're connecting on that, what you're going to see on the interface is we're going to show you the Nitro client. And the Nitro client will actually allow you to come in and generate API calls so you can actually log in to the NetScaler on the GUI itself with the NetScaler configuration utility, and then you have the ability to actually generate the API calls that people would actually end up wanting to use. And of course, if the internet doesn't cooperate, we're not going to be able to see anything. So we'll just go back to the deck.
I think access is back up.
Access should be back up.
Access is back up?
Yeah.
Okay, then in that case, Yep. Hold on. In that case, that means I can actually hit this. Hey, look at that. Yay for internet coming back. All right. We log into our VPX. We're logging into our XDX. So part of the reasons for logging in now is so it doesn't time out. So here we go. This is the NetScaler SDX. Here's the hypervisor, just for purposes so you can kind of see what we're talking about with the system and the management we give you. This is what we call the SVM. This is a GUI management interface for all of your instances. So you can see it actually shows you at a snapshot glance, kind of, and this is actually pretty cool. See all the interfaces on the physical box. Here are all your NetScaler instances we have set up. This is one of the networking lab units we have for the Western region. And you can actually see which interfaces map to which instances right there at the top. So you can actually do things like prune the interfaces available for specific instances. Then you can see over here, the system resource utilization shows you how the SSL chips, cores, memory, all that stuff is hard allocated. Here's more information on, different hardware aspects. So this is kind of showing you what's going on there. And then now from a configuration perspective, right, you come in, you see your basic system level configuration, and here on the NetScaler, this is the key thing, here are your NetScaler instances. So now I click on one of these, and that's what opens up the login here to this page. So now I'm actually going to log in and connect to one of the VPX instances. So this could be a regular VPX, an ESX server. In this case, it happens to be on an SDX. So you can actually see this is what the NetScaler GUI looks like as of version 11. So you see your typical stuff with licenses and features over here, our layer 7 policy management and all the feature sets here, traffic management where you would configure load balancing. And as you expand this tab, you will see things like, oh yeah, here's my virtual servers. And you can see I've got a couple here that I've got enabled in the state down. So now what I'm going to do is open a new tab. I know it's an interesting spot to have it. A link to the documentation. And we have something here called the Nitro client that we put into the GUI as a version 10.5. If you're not aware of this, which I wasn't really, now I'm going to authenticate in to the NetScaler. And what happens is you can actually go in and, for example, take a look at all of these different areas. This is pretty much all the configuration for you can do on the NetScaler. And to be clear, the GUI that we've written leverages the Nitro API. So it's just a wrapper framework, right? So when you actually look at GUI requests, they're actually the commands, like when you show stuff, when you add stuff. And here, for example, yep.
Is the documentation anywhere other than on the box?
It's online too, yep.
Okay, good, thank you.
Exactly. So for example, if you're coming here in load balancing and you go to load balancing virtual server, with this Nitro client, which I think is pretty cool, right now I can do a get all from this GUI. I can issue this request. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to get a result. Here we format it. And you can see here's the test 1 virtual server. Here's the test 2 virtual server, which correspond exactly to the 2 virtual servers I have here. Shows all the. So what this allows you to do is from our own interface. And I know, I've seen people comment about, well, don't give me, like all these tools without giving me a way to utilize it. I think this is actually very cool for people who want to learn and do simple tasks, right? Exactly, hey, what would it look like? What's the formatting for Nitro? I don't know anything about this. We give you this tool right here to use. But similarly, if we go on, right, and you look at it, there's some other tools out there. So for example, if you guys are familiar with Postman, right, so it's a plugin into Chrome, and you can actually do the exact same thing where you can actually go and, run these requests. And as you can see, whoops, as I lost Postman, put it back here, I just issued it. I already have the command lined up, which I can copy and paste from the Nitro client in the GUI. So now I've got a third-party tool, and you can see I've gotten the same information here in Postman, which allows me to extensively leverage this and do more things with it.
Is that no-off misleading?
Yeah, right now, exactly, very good. So right now, because I authenticated into the API when I logged in before from the client, it's actually allowing authentication commands in, so I didn't have to send the auth. Otherwise, I'd have to craft an auth request with username, password to that IP address, etc. if I was doing it directly.
So because Postman. You logged in with your web browser,
yep.
It has a cached entry for your IP
it caches
address.
the cookie and passes it through, exactly.
Okay.
So we can and you can control access to all that kind of stuff if you want to, right?
Okay.
This is just for purposes of
just making sure.
Speeding stuff up.
Seeing
exactly.
That triggers an emotion.
Yep, of course. Yep. So similarly on that note, note that we're not just going to say, here's an API and use it. So if you're looking at other orchestration type solutions, for example, Puppet, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and Chef and the others, Puppet has a whole section on NetScaler, which if you look right here and as you scroll down, there is a full, complete set of all the commands and all the stuff you can look at your heart's content. And something that I think is very interesting, if you guys aren't familiar, Walmart is open sourcing their OneOps, which is their management solution. And I think the cool thing about this is because Walmart has a very large deployment of NetScalers, they've made the NetScaler SDKs for like the previous versions work completely. So one challenge you've seen in a lot of orchestration solutions, even OpenStack, with OpenStack, or if you have some plugins, you have a limited subset of functionality you can perform. You can do basic load balancing, you can do basic, health checks, all that kind of stuff. But you want to do complicated layer 7, you're going to run into that hasn't been configured. You have to develop it yourself. Well, as it turns out, OneOps, for example, as an orchestration solution, has the full capability up to version 10.5 currently, and I believe they're adding 11. So you could actually just go and deploy that, and as an end user, they could easily configure it to do everything they need. Just to kind of show you the value you can get from
I like the idea if
tools.
you've got Citrix NetScaler, you should definitely deploy OneOps then. Is that the suggestion?
That's an option. That's an option.
Find a private cloud strategy based on your load balancer. Excellent work.
Just
Love
an option for what you can do.
Love that.
Yep.
Just as if it would make sense.
Yeah. Probably it's as good as any other reason for make a choice.
So, and obviously, if you're interested in it, then we've got plenty of blog entries on our side too around how to configure it and the clients and stuff, and we have a lot of people doing interesting things with it. So now I'm going to talk about a couple other aspects of management. Control Center. So again, speaking about orchestration and virtualization, right? You look at what's happening with virtualization on the compute and storage side and automation and orchestration there. Obviously, the network isn't there yet. So how easy is it to add a subnet right now? Currently, everyone knows it's a major pain. You got to hit multiple devices. You run into problems, and the whole thing about SDN isn't quite there yet. So we've looked at how does the NetScaler play into these orchestration solutions and how do we sort of future-proof and error-proof this. And we realized that as the networks are getting virtualized, we need to decouple the logical and physical network infrastructure from each other, right? And just out of curiosity, how many people have heard of NetScaler Control Center here? Okay, great. So the idea is that we want to give you programmatic control for automated provisioning in any workload. So if you look at it, here's the concept. Whether you've got NSX, CloudStack, OpenStack, whatever type of orchestration type solution, one challenge would be, imagine you've got a whole recipe using, OpenStack to spin up servers, add them into a load balancing pool, and then actually, put them in rotation and then deprovision them as demand goes down. Well, what happens when you upgrade your NetScaler code? OpenStack knows how to talk to a NetScaler based on specific version because it knows what commands to send it to do those things, right? Well, if we upgrade the code, OpenStack isn't necessarily going to update itself. So what we've decided is put in Control Center as an intermediary layer. And that allows you to basically present the same framework with these cloud adapters to whatever orchestration solution you use. So that's always consistent. And then on the back end, when you upgrade your NetScaler code or make any changes, you update Control Center and you upgrade the code on there. And obviously, as you can imagine, what's Control Center using to talk to the NetScaler? The RESTful API, right? So at that point, it allows you to maintain consistency no matter what you're doing as you move forward in cloud management, multi-tenant management, whatever you're doing with your NetScalers. Questions, comments on this? I'm going very quickly here, but we're just giving the high level. I think it's pretty cool, and it also gives you an idea of we're looking at how to deploy these in these kinds of environments. Now, Insight Center and AppFlow. So how many folks here know about Insight Center and AppFlow? Excellent, this is great. So, usual obligatory slide about troubleshooting being, the main concern, and there was a nice one with finger pointing that didn't translate to the new format, so I had to leave it out. So what we've got is NetScaler Insight Center. So this is a VM you're going to download and put on a server, and it's going to collect information from your NetScalers. And there's two components, HGX Insight, Web Insight, but more importantly, the thing we're going to talk about here is AppFlow. So I'm assuming the answer to this is probably everyone. Everyone here knows what NetFlow is, an IP fix, right? So in case you're not aware, what we've done is we've taken the IP fix protocol and we've added extensions to it. Open source extensions, and we're calling it AppFlow, layer 7 extensions. So the idea is that you've got all these devices out there that are collecting NetFlow data, right, from your network devices, layer 3, layer 4. They should be more useful information coming from them. And the NetScaler is seeing all this information, so why don't we generate these AppFlow records? So what do they look like? Well, we know it's text-based information. So as you can see here, here's an example of the fields and packets we captured. So what we've done is added things like transaction ID, TCP timing data, and classifying the flows by name, in addition to all the layer 7 information that the NetScaler gets because it sees that traffic. So now you've got much more detailed, granular layer 7 application level data. So whereas in NetFlow, you're like, okay, this source IP port talked to that source IP port, big whoop, what does that tell me? Now you get actual detailed reports, pretty charts as I like to call them, that you can show management that will have things like, what percentage of traffic is this application? How many bytes is it? What is the response time coming in? I can generate and report on top URLs, top clients, top refers, all sorts of actual useful information. And this AppFlow information captures it from end to end. Now let's be clear, the initial implementation option of this was, let's have third-party vendors like your SolarWinds, your CA, and all these guys, Splunk, parse this data for you because they're already parsing NetFlow. So we're just adding some extra fields. Shouldn't be a big deal. Well, as it turned out, initially they were gung-ho, and then they sort of trailed off, and we realized we had to come out with our own solution. Hence, Insight Center, right? And the first focus was on web traffic, HTTP, because that's the majority of traffic coming through the NetScaler. We're optimized for it. And so you can generate all of your nice reports. You can see kind of, you have your, breakdown charts, your waterfall page response time charts, what's going on, full end-to-end. But then we realized, wait, okay, we've got all this information for web traffic, but what's the other main type of traffic passing through the NetScaler? all the ICA traffic. So we got full details on what we call HDX Insight, right, which is exactly all of the detailed information, which, as we mentioned earlier, you can only get with the NetScaler because we can actually break into the ICA virtual channels and all that. So for customers who have those virtual desktops, we get them much more detailed reporting and information, and integrates in with your existing Zen desktop management tools. And then, of course, as already mentioned, right, if you look at it now from a holistic point of view, when you have a Cloud Bridge solution, NetScaler solution, and you're leveraging Insight Center from all of those, you get full end-to-end visibility, right? All of the details that you can see from the Cloud Bridge perspective combined with the NetScaler perspective allow you to get full detail and reporting, and at a level that, you know, most other people can't do.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Can you also leverage, let's say, IPFix flows from third-party vendors in your management tool?
Not currently. I think that's something we've been talking about, you know, possibly looking at based upon demand. So if that's something you're interested in, we can always, you know, take a look at it. Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think the focus right now of our tool is really to go deep on our infrastructure, because there are plenty of companies out there that consume
Regular
NetFlow
IPFix.
amongst tons of other data sources, and they do a phenomenal job of it. Our real question is, how do we collect the right data for being able to make the rest of our own infrastructure work better and optimize? So the leaning is that way, but as always, we're all ears. So if there's a good reason we should be paying attention to something else, let us know.
And one additional question, do you send out full line rate app data streams, or are they sampled?
It's full line rate, so it's on a per transaction basis, but you can control it using a policy. So if you only want to send a subsection of your data, you can do that too.
And you control like which virtual servers you do it for. It's fully configurable. So it's not all or nothing.
Sounds fantastic.
It is. And if you got a NetScaler, one thing I'll say on all this stuff, in case you haven't, if you want to play with a NetScaler, make sure you go to our website, download a VPX. You get a 90-day Platinum Edition NetScaler, fully licensed. And then if you want to see Insight Center, go and download Insight Center, pass some data through it, and send the records and see what it looks like.
So this is a pet thing of mine. So when we get demos on the web, fully licensed is great. I don't care about throughput, because generally speaking, if I'm testing something, it's because I want to run against the REST API, I want to configure it, I want to play with it. I would love to see a dev download, if you like, that has a perpetual license with a very low throughput limit.
We do.
Okay.
So it's called NetScaler Developer Edition, in fact. And in case you're not aware of it, anytime you have any NetScalers of any type, you are entitled to as many NetScaler Developer Editions as you want, 1 megabit per second, but Platinum Edition. And it's a 1-year license, so it's not perpetual, but 1 year is pretty good. And if you don't have access to it, you can just talk to your sales rep or someone, and they can get you access to your Citrix account for the license.
And if we don't have NetScalers?
If you don't have NetScalers, then no. So it's the 90-day Platinum Edition eval trial, or you have NetScaler Standard Edition. So unfortunately,
I'm going to double check on that, because I believe the Developer Edition is available
free for anyone.
But it's not the full Platinum license. But let me double check on that.
We'll have to double check.
We can take it offline. It was just,
or you've just brought up a use case that Steve will productize. So that works. All right, cool. The last bit I'm going to talk about here is, again, for those folks who have multiple NetScalers, command centers, so you can kind of see, especially as you start talking about, for example, CPX and containerization, where obviously you're going to be deploying then, just a pair of boxes. What is Command Center? What are the main things you can do? It's kind of hopefully the obvious stuff, but I just want to highlight to make sure everyone knows. The best reasons, top 4 reasons: archiving configs, understanding appliances natively, faults and performance alerts, and config automation. So for example, deployment automation. If you have multiple NetScalers and you have all of them being managed with Command Center, you can actually select, edit, deploy configs to all of your boxes. So say you're propagating a change out. So from one single GUI utility interface, you can just hit one button, propagate out the change to add a new load balancing virtual server, change a page, change the monitor, et cetera, et cetera. Your obvious typical use case, historical audit trail. So all of the changes that have been made in the box when you're trying to figure out why did the site go down that time and who was logged in, right? All of that's centralized and stored, whereas some of that information is harder to find within, individual units. Command Center has specific sections for that. right? The dashboard, which shows you, for example, just at a simple glance, things like how many NetScalers you have, different types, where the alarms are, and information that you really want to act upon immediately. The reports you can generate on all of the counters. So Anil mentioned 10,000 plus counters on the NetScaler. So all of those counters are available. So AAA sessions here, you click that drop down, everything is basically there. So you can go generate the reports on whatever from Command Center. Just a nice GUI interface for that. And we can do things, as many customers have asked, create event triggers to do things like send out mail and notifications. So for administrators, any specific things you want to make sure you want to alert on. A lot of customers haven't deployed Command Center because they think that, oh, I have to have like 20 NetScalers. But as it turns out, the value add it provides works even if you just have a pair or just a VPX, right? There's a lot of functionality it does above and beyond. And similarly, command actions, right? You can actually automate commands too from Command Center too. And performance triggers, so you can actually do things like this one here, right? Possible DDoS in an SL service based upon a threshold and value. So, right, as things go above a certain level, then higher than you're expecting, send out some information to me. Create accounts, delete accounts, the basic stuff there. So the point is that now, it used to be different, Command Center is included with all the products. There's no minimum licensing requirement. You have full access to it. Very easy to use, easy to set up. Again, just another download, that you set up a VM on a server. And 5.2 is the latest release, so some of the interesting things, like obviously we have some DevOps configuration management stuff with the SDX, SSL certificate enhancements, more fault management in terms of automating task execution over alarms. And in our latest release, we've done stuff for SMTP3 trap support and a lot more stuff on the app firewall and administration and controlling who can access the box. So a lot of enhancements. We continue to enhance the product, and so if you haven't seen it, or you know people who should probably be using it for the added value, definitely have them check out Command Center. So that pretty much concludes my section on management. Any questions about any of that stuff? I know we breezed through things, but
Command Center was the piece that was going to work with CPX, right?
So there's not a specific necessity of it being for CPX, but I believe that it's going to be one of the pieces that we can orchestrate with that.
That was going to be my question, right? The obvious value of CPX is like your overall control of those containers.
Yeah. Yep.
But is that a prereq for the containers, or can the containers be deployed manually without?
So you ask an interesting question.
Be deployed without Command Center actually.
So no, not today. So right now, the way that we're seeing, I think all of our customers really go in this direction is they're thinking about containers in an automated form. They're not thinking about this as a traditional Unix process that they just fire up and give it a conf file. So we need to configure it by way of API. Anil, do you have any corrections to that?
Feel free to say I'm wrong. Okay. So I'll say this is more of a PM decision. I mean, CPX by itself is just like any other container, so we can open it up. But then the fact is, controller just adds a lot of intelligence and value to it. So.
Yeah, and the thing I'll add is obviously when you're looking at it, one of the key things is the management of all of those and a lot of the things we talked about and where things are going in the future. So those are the interesting questions.
I think the purpose of putting it out as a tech preview before and giving it that time before we go GA is specifically to solicit input like this. So what should I do?
That's a good question.
Just one last thing. So along that line of thought, I think there is something very interesting to say about that, which is I think maybe what you're pointing to is the developers may not have a fully running command center, for instance, on their laptops if they want to do something. So one can envision a world where you could effectively get an offline version of a XML-based sort of, rendition of a config that you could effectively upload, directly into your CPX system on your laptop. And then when it joins up to the mothership command center, effectively it downloads off of that. So these are all sort of variations of that we're thinking of. But like you said, it's work in progress. So we're learning a lot about how people want to deploy this. Is it part of a mothership overall umbrella command center running and then the laptop version sort of runs off of that? Or is that completely disconnected from when it goes from dev into then the main code base and then ends up in staging and production? And
I think at some point you're going to want to have a scheduler like Kubernetes that can push the CPX by itself, and then when it's out, it syncs up to Command Center for the analytics stuff. I mean, these schedulers have constructs specifically for this, right? Like that would be part of a pod or something.
Yes, exactly. However, the dev of, an actual developer just developing a code on their laptop itself without an orchestrator or other things, right? That is a specialized use case, but that's also a very important use case.
Right.
So anyway, lots of stuff happening.
I'll also add that one of the challenges that we've run across so far is that a lot of the orchestrators have very simplistic views of what a load balancer is. They know about HA proxy, that's kind of it, and there's a lot more in terms of what what we've brought to it, right? Because there's the benefits of having one code base across all of them. And so we do need some ways of being able to communicate those additional policies. So it's in principle, we could take it to the point where it's just Kubernetes alone, but you will have lost a lot of the value.
Now that point is equally applicable to ACI or NSX or OpenStack or Apprenda or it's not that's not unique to containers, right? Because all of the my point is a couple of things I was going to say was one is the focus on management software is the fact that NFV and all that functionality has driven the awareness that a load balancer doesn't exist in isolation. Once upon a time, the load balancer guy bought load balancers. Now the load balancer is part of a bigger system, and you have to integrate east, west, up, down, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's not just about containers. You need to take that whole discussion about load balancers and say integration with vendor platforms who've managed to carve out an incumbent space, NSX, ACI, and then you've got OpenStack, and then you've got other cloud platforms like OneOps and Mesosphere, and all those others. They all have very simplified views of what load balancing can achieve.
Right.
And that's a systemic problem in the industry.
It's actually really interesting bringing up OpenStack is load balancers as they relate to orchestration engines and the container world is almost exactly where OpenStack and load balancers were some time ago, right? When you actually looked at OpenStack and looked at the interfaces into LBs, incredibly simplistic, right? And just like Steve pointed out, 98% of the functionality wasn't even representable inside of that. If you wanted to do fully automated OpenStack deployments with LBs, we're there with containers right now, so it's going to take a little more time for that. So in the meantime, we have no other recourse other than to have Command Center and other things deploy the full version of the load balancer out of band from these orchestration engines, so to say.